Okay, we are with Nolan. Nolan, before I mess up your last name, and because I just heard it like three times and now I'm going to screw it up, can you please say your last name for us?
Last name is Matthias.
Matthias, Nolan Matthias, and a good friend, a good mutual friend. I'm not sure if we're allowed to say his name or not. Nolan, are we allowed to say?
He's been on your show before.
Yeah, so Craig Ballantyne. Craig Ballantyne's a great guy. He made this introduction, and Nolan was kind enough, without knowing much about us, kind enough, I think, through Greg, to agree to come on here and do this. And then in researching Nolan, we realized Nolan is really just hitting it out of the park on a whole bunch of stuff that he's doing. So just really impressed with that. And we're going to ask Nolan's journey and how he got started into this, how he built his YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. But just to get us right into this, Nolan, I am super curious. What's your take right now on where Canadian real estate is at or interest rates are at? Any angle you want to go here to just get us started. I just want to jump right in. Where do you think we're at? Do we have a rate cut coming in June of this year? Because I think I think it was a CIBC report came out and said maybe it's on the table. Where are we at with interest rates in this country?
Yeah, I love this question because I know you had Steve Saretsky on recently, and he was talking about the fact that he got it wrong at the end of 2021. And I'm an economist by education, so my big thing on interest rates and looking at this is I'm never trying to figure out where interest rates are trying to go. I'm trying to figure out what the worst case scenario could be in both directions. But really, what I understand about central banks and how they work and how they worked since the early 1990s and into the 2000s more in North America is communication has become just as important as the actual rate decision. It used to be that they just change rates, nobody would expect it, and then that would create a really significant impact in an economy. And in the 1990s, globally, central banks switched to being more open about communication and realizing that as they communicate, that actually has just as much of an effect as actually making the rate cuts do. So when I look at it from the perspective of where we're at right now, there's lots of communication happening. And what I see in the communication is that they're preparing the economy, whether it's the Fed in the US or the Bank of Canada in Canada, they're preparing people for both possibilities. And when they're communicating, they're changing their communication slowly. We're seeing this in the US with the Fed right now. It's like they come out and they change their inflation projections, their unemployment projections, and their GDP projections, and then they said, "But we're staying the course for 3 interest rate cuts in 2024." And then a week later, one of the governors comes out and says, "Well, there might not be as many." And then a week after that, it's like, "Well, there could be none at all" by another governor. And it's just like they slowly and strategically change the communication on things. And when I watch what's going on with the Bank of Canada right now, it's like, yeah, they're adjusting communication on a pretty regular basis. And I don't know when the first rate cut will happen. I do believe it will happen eventually. It could happen as early as June. It could happen later, depending on what happens with the GDP numbers and obviously with inflation, although I think the GDP numbers are more important right now. But I really think it's anybody's guess at this point when those rates go down and how much they go down. And I think the biggest mistake people are making right now is pretending they have any sort of certainty in what's going to happen. Yeah. Like if 2020 wasn't, and 2021 and 2022 wasn't enough of a lesson about, thinking
being
that
wrong,
it's going to be what happens, so I'm going to make decisions based on that belief. I mean, then did we collectively as a society learn nothing? Like, come on.
Yeah, maybe I'm hard-headed, Nolan. I always want to think that I can figure it out. But yeah, I was one of the ones that was pretty wrong because I was thinking, a rate cut or 2, maybe 3, but nothing like they were able to pull off so far. Okay, so then I'm curious, what would be the setup for them to just not drop rates? Because I think we can all see the scenario where they would want to or need to, however you want to frame that, drop rates. Mm-hmm. What would be the setup that they don't drop rates, that inflation just U-turns directly from here and they cannot cut them?
I think if momentum shifts, and right now the momentum is heading in a positive direction, inflation's coming down. I mean, never before has the central bank cut rates when we weren't in an inflationary period. Now, that being said, they increased interest rates so much that there's a case to be made that they should be cutting them, even though we aren't heading into a recessionary period because they went too far. But it's never really happened before. So for them to be cutting interest rates when we're not in a negative GDP scenario would be abnormal. And really what I think they're going to look at is they're going to look at the momentum. And if the momentum is continuing to head to that, less inflation and, GDP is coming down and unemployment's getting higher and the momentum stays in that direction, then we're going to see interest rate cuts. But if something changes, and this is where that communication piece becomes a problem, if something changes and people start to believe that the economy is going to be okay and we're all good and I'm going to go and start spending my money again like it's 2020. It used to be like party like it's 1999. Now it's like party like it's 2020. And people start spending like that again, that could shift those inflation numbers. And if that shifts, then it could very much change the course of where the Bank of Canada goes.
Huh. Okay. So where do you think then, I'm just jumping way ahead. Where do you think, I hate generalizing Canadian real estate prices, but however you want to take it, where do you think Canadian real estate prices are 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah.
I mean, pick however you want to frame it. I know an average Canadian real estate price is rather ridiculous, but on the whole, where do you think we're headed here?
I think you could probably use, and I don't love making forecasts just because I have enough training in economics to know that a forecast is often perceived as like crystal ball. I think you can use 2021 as a baseline and where the prices came down to as a pretty solid baseline for the next 5 to 10 years. But, you look at the immigration numbers, you look at the fact that we just had the new home permits data come out, and the number of new home permits, new build permits is going down. Well, all of these incentives are being put into place for builders to build properties. And to me, that's kind of scary. And then compare that with the immigration data. And it's like, is there a case to be made for them to come down at all? And is there going to be a crash at some point? As of right now, based on the information we have, no. So, I have a feeling that we borrowed a little bit of future buying from, 2023, 2024, 2025, and we moved a whole bunch of it up with what happened with the pandemic. But then after that, I could make a case for the fact that we're probably going to see a pretty normal growth clip as the worst case scenario for the next 5 to 10 years.
And would a pretty normal growth clip to you be, I took the Toronto real estate data, and from the year 2000 to present day, it works out to roughly 7% compounded annual growth. And that's Toronto prices. Yep. Is that what you're referring to as like the pretty normal kind of growth?
Yeah, I think North America typically runs it at 4 to 5. If you go back and look at it over a really long bandwidth, going back to like 1920s, 1930s, and you look at it as which is probably too high because obviously, when we see inflation numbers that are 2 or 3%, should housing be going up more than inflation? The answer is probably not. But when you also look at interest rates and how that factors in and cost of borrowing and everything else, I think that 4 to 5% and higher, depending on the market, is probably a pretty safe bet. Now, the other thing you have to pay attention to is the fact that we're a very large country with a very small population, and in reality, each province should probably be looked at as its own individual real estate market. I think we can break it down to that narrow, and then when you start looking at it from the perspective of each province having its own market, different markets are going to go do different things. Vancouver, BC is always going to be a market where people want to live. Toronto's essentially becoming the Manhattan of Canada. So it's going to be the central hub of finance and production in Canada. And so it's going to have a different market. And then you just got to look at the different markets from there outside, whether it's Quebec or Alberta or wherever, and look at all those individually. And really, I don't think it's smart to look at the entire country's real estate market as a whole, but actually looking at the individual markets, I think is really what's going to have to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. Because if since 2006 is any indicator, Calgary and Toronto were pretty evenly priced up until 2006, and now look at it like, I don't know, I can't even remember what the average home price in Calgary is, but it isn't over 700,000, and then look at what it is in Toronto.
when we got into this business, we thought, oh my gosh, like real estate seems like one of the ways Canadians can quote unquote get ahead financially. And, my brother and I had bought rental properties in our 20s, and we kept looking at the numbers and we're like, wow, like, I don't know, this stuff seems like it kind of works out. Our family has a history, 70s, 80s, almost losing everything in the 90s, recession, really nasty. So then when we work with investors, this is what I want your take on this. What we'll say is, like, when we look at the numbers, that if you can put 20% down, and in this area, it's 7%, like an appreciation, even if it's lower, I use 7 lately, that's a 35% return on the 20% that you put down. So that's one way to kind of get ahead financially. And I also explain to new people that usually people don't even want to get into real estate investing. Like, no one really is looking to become a landlord or deal with tenants or, do things the right way with maintenance and maintain properties and deal with banks. And it's all a hassle. I mean, you're in mortgages, you know what I mean when it comes to dealing with banks. So when you hear me say that, what comes to mind for you? Do you think that's just like and I'm just being open. I'm just getting to know you. So I'm really curious. Like, do you think that's just like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe you say that, Tom? Like, that's just ridiculous? Or is that just the state of where some Canadians find themselves? They're trying to get ahead financially and they're forced into becoming real estate investors, even if that means they're going to be vilified in the media lately, which seems to be happening more and more.
Yeah. Well, and let's call a spade on that. The investor activity is such a small drop in the bucket relative to the change in preferences for properties, that to put the blame on real estate investors is completely asinine, but it seems to be where the media and the government went. But it really is such a small percentage of the actual homes that were bought and sold in Canada over the last, I don't know, call it 3 years, but call it a decade or 2 decades as well. But when it comes to the actual investing strategy, and I've had lots of mentors in the real estate industry. I've been in it for 21 years. I came out of it straight out of university. And, I've read the Robert Kiyosaki books, which before he went a little bit off his rocker, like, he was the best education source and still is. If you go back and look at his old stuff, he's still the best education source for somebody who is even considering being in real estate investing. And I think he's right that real estate investing is probably the most reliable tool when it comes to building wealth, because it's simple. Everyone understands it. You buy a home, you put a renter in it. Over a period of 25 years, they're going to pay for it. You might have some maintenance costs, but if you've got a good backstop and you've got your finances set up and they're well taken care of, like, this is the simplest form of investment that you can have, versus like trying to pick stocks, which is exceptionally more complicated than, understanding the basics of buy a home and have somebody live in it. So, I was always taught that by a lot of my mentors that if you can put 20% down and you can have a property break even, it's going to be the simplest and the best investment that you'll ever make in your life. And we've bought properties with that in mind, and we just buy them and we play the long game. And the one thing that sticks out in my mind is, as you were saying, that is when we look at our investments, we actually look at them as with zero appreciation. So when I make an investment in a real estate property, I'll look at it and go, okay, what's this look like over 25 years if it went up 0% in value? And then we treat the appreciation as the bonus. And what that does from the perspective of our portfolio is it creates a scenario where we're looking purely at the fundamentals. We don't have to rely on properties going up in value. And when we're doing that, if the numbers work, the numbers work. And it creates a really good safety net, because we know that the numbers work and we're not relying on a property going up by, 25% over the next 35 years in order for it to make sense.
Yeah, it's been a hard thing to kind of get people to not think about depreciation, just because it's been so much over the last 15 years, I guess, specifically. But you're right. Nick and I, whenever we look at our own properties, we would always say, would we own this one for 10 years? So we didn't use 25. We always said, if we're going to buy this right now, even if we're thinking to do something quick with it, because before we did flip properties and we just realized we can't do that. We're not really that great at it, and it's way too risky and way too speculative, and we should have learned that many years ago. But when we were buying them, even if we thought we would hold it only for 2 or 3 years, we always thought, would we hold it for 10?
Mhm.
And if the answer was yes, then we would proceed. But if the answer was no, even if our time frame for that particular project was 2 or 3, we're like, forget it. We're just not getting into it because interest rates can change, the economy can change, and it's just too risky. So yeah, I like that 25 years. And then to cover the costs in the Toronto area here, just getting more and more difficult. Student rentals seem to work still. I don't know if you know the student rental rates out in this particular area, but there's, by Western University, we're seeing 900 is low for a room in a student rental. We're seeing $1,000, $1,200 a room. So if you have a 5-bedroom, house, it's getting $5,000. So student rentals, at some of those universities, and they don't seem to have been impacted with the uptick in the increase in foreign students coming into the country. They've just always had high demand, like McMaster and Hamilton, Western and London, in this area anyway. Queens and Kingston, that kind of stuff. So those have been interesting. And then just the necessity to put more into the property to make it cash flow. So turning a straight rental or single family home rental into a legal second suite with maybe now a laneway in the back, and needing to do that to make the numbers work. But you need capital to pull that off. You need capital to finish the basement properly, to finish that laneway. So it's definitely seems like the real estate investor is going to be more sophisticated going forward. It's going to be less of the beginner investor coming in. To me, it looks like there's going to be a separation. It's either like a professional investor is going to play in this world now, and not so much the mom and pop who's just going to get in easy in this area anyway. Feels like that dynamic's changing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what's important is getting the younger people now, and when it comes to investing in real estate, if you're young, if you're 20 something and you buy an entry level property, not like a McMansion like everyone believes should be their first home, which like the expectations around what a first home looks like in the last 5 years are ridiculous. If you really get into it and you're like, okay, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to buy that apartment condo that I can afford at that university, and I'm going to hold that property for the next 18 to 20 years, knowing that it's not going to be a property I live in forever, but a property that potentially could turn into a really good rental for me. And then I'm going to buy whatever my McMansion is down the road. I think that's the way that you get, the non-institutional investors into the market, but you got to get them into the market. And there's so much fear around getting into the market now that people are staying out of it. And the longer they stay out of it, the less likelihood they're going to have of actually being able to get into it as prices continue to climb.
Nolan, we were talking briefly before we started recording, and you mentioned something about real estate investors. Where do you see, and I don't know what you want to share here, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Where are real estate investors doing things incorrectly? What are you seeing that's wrong? What are people trying to do that they shouldn't try to do? You're getting exposed to a lot of stuff. So I don't know, just whatever you want to say. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where I'm really cautious about with my YouTube following and whatnot, who I platform in this space. And what I mean by platform is who I'll have conversations with publicly. And what I love about what you guys are doing is you're reasonable about it. It's long term. You're thinking about it as if you're business people, as opposed to thinking about it as you're on a get rich quick scheme. And what we've noticed over the last couple of years, like in 2021, we actually had to make the decision not to take on any clients for investment properties that weren't already clients. So in other words, they have to have already got a home and got a mortgage through us, or we were just not going to take them on. And the reason why is because, especially in those years where everything was so hot, there was so much bad information out there. I mean, the thing that always made our hair stand up on our necks is when somebody came to us and said, I'm a real estate investor, I want you to help me. And by the way, I'm going to bring 20 people with me. Yeah. And they're all going to use you as well. And I'm like, wow, we got to cut this guy off right out of the gate, because if he's not opening with, I'm buying this property, what do you think? He's opening with, I'm going to get rich really fast and I got 20 friends. I'm like, not only do I not want the 20 friends, but I got to get rid of him as quick as possible, because somebody told him that what he could do was possible and was probably completely unrealistic with them. And by the way, he probably gave that person $10,000 or $20,000 in order to get that information. And we would either have to completely retrain them, we would have to Tell them that what they can't do is not possible, or in a lot of cases, borderline mortgage fraud. And when I say borderline mortgage fraud, I mean
actual mortgage fraud. Yeah, got it.
And they don't realize that what they're doing is actual mortgage fraud, and because somebody's told them it's not. But the definition of mortgage fraud is an omission or a misrepresentation. So if you lie about or don't tell anything, that's mortgage fraud at the most basic level. And we just said, hey, like, we can't take you on unless you're somebody that we know, because there was so much of it happening. And really a lot of it was around, trying to buy multiple properties at the same time, and going to 5 different mortgage companies to have one application at each of the 5 different mortgage companies on 5 different properties, and hoping that none of the lenders found out about the other 4 properties they were buying simultaneously. So there's just a lot of that stuff going on. And for me, it was really around the fact that people had unreasonable expectations and didn't realize that when you invest using debt, you're inherently increasing your risk exponentially, which means you need to be, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I'm saying you need to be really smart about how you do it. And a lot of people the last few years were not smart about how they were leveraging up.
Yeah, it's interesting. When things are going really well in real estate, people think it can never turn. And then when when things go a bit negative, they think it'll just go totally in the tank. I find there's no middle ground. It's like, it's just going to go up forever, or it's going to zero. That's kind of like my, and right now I feel like it's the going to zero moment for a lot of people we're speaking to anyway, because of that new capital gains announcement that was announced in the federal budget. I don't even think it's passed yet, but that has, for whatever reason, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, as a response from just people we work with, that has triggered the most, like, that's it, real estate, it's over. This is the final straw for real estate. And it's interesting. And I think that's just maybe the population just, have had enough, and this is the straw for some people. But that does seem to be my experience in real estate over a little while now, is there's just that it's always going to be better than it even could possibly ever be, or it's going to be worse than anyone ever expects. There's no middle ground.
Totally. And it's crazy, because that capital gains tax thing, let's say it does become law. Let's say it does become an issue. Like, we're talking about $250,000. You have $1 million property, you've got to have a 25% increase in the value of the property on the capital gains. You're not getting taxed on the income that you earned and paid down the mortgage on. You're just getting taxed on the gain in the value of the property, the appreciation, right? Mm-hmm. And then I have a good buddy who he used to work for TD. He was the TD Wealth guy, who his job was to go and poach the most wealthy people in the country from the other 5 banks. And he said something to me years ago that was just like, it was like that moment for me where I was like, oh, he said, never, ever, ever make investing decisions based on the tax implications. Mm-hmm. Like, you never, ever, ever chase taxes and forgo investment. You need to chase the investment, make sure the returns are there, and then the taxes are just something that are external that you have to deal with. And when he said that to me, it was like, oh, that makes sense. Because what am I going to do? Not buy property and not get wealthy? Because I'm going to have to give the government an extra $4,000 on that, extra $50,000 in appreciation that I got. Like, doesn't make any sense to forgo it because, I don't like Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I want to ask you a bit about your journey, because you're like this fascinating case study for me. But before I do, there's one more. I want your economist hat again. Bank of America put out this chart. I don't know if you saw it. It briefly made the rounds on Twitter. And it was basically saying the annualized interest that the US is paying right now is $1.1 trillion on its debt. Mm-hmm. And if rates don't change by December of this year, it'll be 1.6 trillion. So like a $500 billion increase. And when I look at stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, they can, the Federal Reserve in the US, the Bank of Canada here, anyone can say what they want. But to me, it looks like they're going to create a narrative. And I don't know if I'm getting conspiratorial here now by me saying they're going to create a narrative, but they'll create a narrative where interest rates are going to come down. Because there's no way they're taking an annualized interest payment from 1.1 trillion to 1.6 trillion later this year. Am I just being silly with my thinking there, or what are your thoughts? I'm curious.
No, I think the thinking sound on it. There's there's kind of this piece that plays into that though about America versus the world and whether or not it's realistic for America to have that level of debt and the interest payments and everything else. And I think what the problem is that oftentimes when you look at data like that, you're looking at America in a vacuum and you're going, oh, this is really bad. But when you look at it from a global perspective, it's like, is the US in any worse of a situation than any of the other countries? And the answer is no. Like, everyone found themselves in the same pandemic boat. So then it comes down to like, well, one avenue of fixing that is to have lower interest rates. The other is to just realize that the entire world put a whole bunch of money into every economy, and we're just going to find this weird new normal where, yeah, our money supply is bigger than it used to be and things cost more. And, you know, we've done for the last 40 years a really good job of making sure inflation was around 2%. And we can probably do that same sort of job over the next 40 years. But we're just going to have this period where it's like, yeah, we put a bunch of money in the economy and now that's just the new world order of things. But I mean, when I look at that stuff as well, and when I say that, I'm like, the honest answer is I have no freaking clue.
Sure.
But when I look at it and I go, okay, well, I have all this external data and this external input, and I'm trying to predict where interest rates are going to go. And from an economist standpoint and from a investing standpoint, really, I'm just looking at it going, okay, that's interesting information. What's my worst case scenario here? And how do I backstop myself for that worst case scenario? And I think when it comes to real estate investing right now, there's two things that people have to pay attention to or should be paying attention to. It's what's my worst case scenario if interest rates just went up a bunch more? So they don't go down, but they actually go up. And not saying that that's going to happen, but I should just figure out what the numbers are. And then number two is if I'm investing in real estate and I don't have a scalable income of some sort, how do I put the pieces in place right now so that I do have a scalable income if the event arises where I need money to inject into my real estate properties or just to be able to buy macaroni and cheese?
You know what I appreciate about you, Nolan, just getting to know you here? You're so calm about these things. You seem so level-headed about them. Whereas I look at that data and I just want to scream. I'm like just waving, I'm like, this is unsustainable. This is crazy. What are we doing? So I like the way you just break it out so nice and evenly there. Like, I'm just more the emotional wreck, and you're the nice level-headed guy who just says this, like, this will all work out, where I'm just like, this is crazy. What are they doing? So thank you for bringing that nice perspective. I appreciate it.
Let me say this, because I'll tell you where that comes from. The really, really wealthy guys in real estate that I know, and I'm not talking about, guys who buy homes. I'm talking about guys who build skyscrapers that are apartment buildings with commercial in the bottom, and they have, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Every single one of them has the same approach when it comes to the government, when it comes to interest rates, when it comes to the economy. They all look at it the same way. Those are external factors. I can prepare, and I'm aware that bad things might happen, but they also look at it and go, I'm also prepared for if it happens, and I've got everything backstopped. So if it does, I'm good. And even like look at Brookfield giving back 2 properties in San Francisco last year. It's like they just handed the keys back. Here, bank doesn't want them. Government's like, the bank didn't even want them. They're so far underwater that they just gave them back to the city. It's like they know what their worst case scenario is, and if their worst case scenario is we're going to, hand back the keys on $200 million skyscrapers, it's like that's the worst case scenario, and they can rebuild from there. Every big company in the world, like if things go bad, it's like, okay, well, we're going to have a bad couple of years, and then when things turn around, we'll just fix it, as long as we don't do something that is completely catastrophic along the way. So when I look at all of this stuff, it's just like, how do I make sure that in my own personal economy, I'm not setting myself up so there's a catastrophic event?
Yeah, that's well said. And that's exactly how we think about it. Even on a property level, Nick and I would always, even when we were younger, if we bought a property, we always thought, okay, could we rent this out? If we can't rent it out, is there a college close by where we could turn this into a student rental? Can we turn this into a legal duplex? What are our options? What's our worst case scenario in this situation? And in our business lives, just our lives, we always plan for the worst case. And sometimes we'll get painted as negative for that. And I'll try to explain I'm actually positive, and I just like to know my worst case so that I can plan for it. And if that's covered, if I can freak out a little bit about the worst case and plan for it, then the positive is going to happen. Like those are my variables. That is the worst case scenario. If I'm comfortable proceeding with a property, a project, a business with the worst case knowledge in mind, I'm good. So yeah, we're very similar on that regard. I think that's a healthy way to look at things for sure. So I'm just curious how I got to know like what you've done on YouTube here and being able to create your content, like the consistency, the discipline required in that is insane. Just kudos to you and what you've built so far, and obviously what you're going to continue to build. How did you get started in this? Like, what is your journey? How did you start? First, how did you start in mortgages? Did the mortgages come before building the platform here?
What kind of language can I use on your podcast?
Yeah, you can swear. Everything is open. Remember, I'm the emotional one. You're the calm one. So if you start swearing, then I'll just start swearing and we'll all get out of control here. So
I love it. So the mortgage story is actually funny because how I got into mortgages is I swore at a professor. Actually, he swore at me and then I swore back at him. So there's a professor at the University of Calgary, a really well-known economist named Frank Atkins.
Okay.
And his shtick was, I'm tenured. I will say whatever I want. And if you tell on me, I'm going to fail you. And they can't fire me because I'm tenured. So deal with it. So like to put this in perspective, for one semester, we had Russian bitch number 1 and Russian bitch number 2 in the class. He didn't know their names. He actually did. They were both like really great students. And he was a mentor for at least one of them. And he just, called them names. So this was 2001. I was sitting in a macroeconomics class. The dot-com bubble had just burst. And I said, what do you think is going to happen in the economy? And he said, well, what do you think is going to happen in the economy? I'm like, I don't know. You're the economist. I'm asking you. And he got mad. And he goes, you know what? What's going to happen in the economy? Look out the fucking window. And he went back to teaching, back to his board. So I'm like, so if you've ever been in a university lecture theater, they all have one thing in common. They don't have windows. So it took me about 10 minutes and I got a little bit of nerve up and I put up my hand again and he goes, what the fuck do you want? And I went, what fucking window? He goes, So Tuesday morning class, he kicked me out. I came back on the Thursday. He walked into the room, saw me sitting there again. He goes, oh, you came back. He goes, get the fuck out. Come see me in my office hours. So I did. And, him and I actually had a great relationship. It was all like showmanship. And he was a great professor because of the showmanship. You wanted to be in his class because it was going to be
it was fun. Yeah.
It was so much fun. And he just said, listen, if you want to know what's going to happen in the economy, you need to be part of the economy. He asked me what I was doing. I was selling golf clubs at the time. He goes, okay, that's cool. You're getting sales experience. But if you really want to get ahead, you need to get a finance job right now. And at the time, TD Bank was set up in the lunchroom, the cafeteria at the university every single day. And you could get hired on to be a teller at TD like that. Like they would take anybody who was on track to have a degree because they were basically building out their portfolio of people that could eventually be on an executive track. And I was like, my mom worked for Bank Montreal for 47 years. So at 10 years old, I had done the take your kid to work day. And I'd worked as a teller and I was like, I'd rather put a campfire out with my face and go and work for TD Bank. So the easiest thing to do at the time was I could go and get a mortgage broker's license. I literally went to the other university in town, picked up the books, read them over the weekend. The math was easy because I was being trained as an economist. Like compound interest is easy to calculate when you are doing that every day. So I picked them up and 3 days later I went and I challenged the test and got licensed to help people make the biggest financial decision of their life without ever actually having done it myself. Thankfully later I helped rewrite the course. It's not as easy to become a mortgage broker anywhere in Canada.
Oh, cool.
But that was how I ended up in the mortgage space. And then, at the end of university, 2 years in, I was making more money as a part-time mortgage broker just because I had some bank relationships and deals they couldn't do. They were sending to me and it was like easy money. So I could have gone and become an investment banker, which was what I thought I was going to do for half the money and twice the hours, or I could continue doing what I was doing. And it ended up working out really, really well from the perspective of, I just had a lot of success really early in my career. Was invited to join a company called Mortgage Architects it was called a lead planner, but it was essentially a partner at the age of 26, which you had to do like $25 million a year in business.
Oh, awesome.
I was the youngest person to ever be invited. And then just had a really solid career and just consistently grown in the mortgage industry that way. So that's really how I got into the industry, and really just fell in love with helping people and making sure they make the right financial choices.
So then how did you stumble into YouTube? What's that? That's a pretty big decision because you've done it really well. This hasn't been like half-assing it. You're going at it. So yeah, what was that decision? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So at one point we had probably the biggest Instagram account in the mortgage space in Canada, and we could just never make it work, right? Like we get a following, but we couldn't convert it into actual transactions. And it turns out very few people have actually been able to do that. We have some ideas on how to do it now, and we're proving some concepts on it, but there was nothing reliable about it. And, with my economics training, when I look at business models, I'm like, I need to be able to know with certainty that it's going to work, or at least some certainty before I do it. And in about 2014, there was a guy named Casey Neistat, who's pretty famous on YouTube, and he started making daily videos, and I was just like watching them every single day. And what amazed me was the fact that I'd come back at 2 p.m. Mountain Time every single day to see what he put out. And I was like, why? There were sometimes I was sitting here going, why am I watching a video about like electric skateboards?
Yeah.
And I started to look more into it, and I started to realize that there was something there. And I made a couple of videos back then. I had a big fight with my wife about buying $500 in camera gear. Made a couple of videos, and then I got like 3 views and 5 views. And I'm like, well, that was stupid. And I basically like shut the account down. And then in 2019, for whatever reason, I logged back into that account, and I had a video on how interest rate differentials worked, which is like, most people don't know how interest rate differentials work. And they also don't know that when a bank gives you a discount of 2% off their posted rate, they're actually not giving you a discount. They're just putting in a term that essentially screws you if you have to pay off your 5-year fixed mortgage. So I made this video on that, and 5 years later, I opened up this YouTube account and it's got like 10,000 views. It was like the go-to video in Canada to figure out how interest rate differentials work.
Awesome.
Oh, wow. So there's something here. I did a 2-year mortgage strategy because at the time you could get a 2-year mortgage for cheaper than a variable. And that video had like 5,000 views. And I went, wow, okay, there's something here. So I started making more videos whenever there was new mortgage rule changes. And then in 2020, in March of 2020, we have 7,000 clients, and pandemic hits, and then all the banks or the government starts talking about mortgage deferrals, and people are calling their bank, and like they were literally getting busy signals, like disconnected.
It's crazy
phones. And we're doing the same thing. Like my wife and I, we have 5 people. We have probably one of the most efficient mortgage companies in Canada. We have 5 people, and we're getting up at 7 a.m. and sitting there till 10 p.m. talking to people about how to defer their mortgage. And we're like, either don't do it because you may not have to, or just keep calling if you really feel like you need to. And I realized that to be able to talk to all our clients, we needed to put out a video on this. And so I made a video, posted on YouTube, sent the link to all of our clients so that they had the information that they needed. Well, then YouTube pushed it out to everybody that wasn't a client. And over the course of that summer, I loved 2020 because I'm a golfer, and I was like, geez, like I don't have to go into the office. I don't have to go and like do the things that normally take up so much time. I'm like, I'm going to golf all summer. So I golfed all summer, and then I opened the account back up in September, and I started to look and see like the number of views. And I'm like, oh, YouTube's trying to tell me something. So in December of that year, I'm like, you know what, let's just give it a go. And I said, I'm going to make a video every business day of December of 2020. And on December 26th and December 27th, I put out 2 videos. One was a why you shouldn't buy physical gold video, and the other was a truth about credit scores in Canada video. And those 2 videos just took off. I went from 500 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers in a month, and then 1,000 to 10,000 subscribers in 9 days. Wow. And then from there, it was like, it was just, it actually became a reliable business model for the mortgage company, to the point where we figured out a whole bunch of stuff, including with real estate agents. For example, we have a formula where, based on the number of views that they get, the average purchase price of the properties that they buy and sell, and the percentage of their commission that they get, we can figure out to within about 10 to 15% how much money they make off of their YouTube channels. Like, it's insane. And for me, when I look at business models, it's like Instagram, I can't do that. But when I look at YouTube, it's like I can actually create a business model around the number of views somebody gets. And when they get those views, it reliably turns into income, which means it's something that's scalable. And when you have a system that's scalable, you know, that's where you start to be able to change lives and change your business and change the way things work forever. And now we've got about 35 different real estate agents and people in the fitness industry as well that we're teaching how to do this. And, you know, a lot of them are having a ton of success. And then what's cool is when you see the numbers come in and they're like, oh, I got 100,000 views. And it's like, you probably got a deal out of that. And they're like, yeah, actually I did. It made me about $15,000. And you're like, see?
So awesome. So you're a numbers guy. And then when you were able to break down business into just numbers, it all just clicked, where you thought, wow, this is now a repeatable process with consistent results that I actually know how to implement. And now you're doing it for yourself. And I don't know everything about you, Nolan. So that's cool. So you're helping other people do this now as well. You're coaching other people. And I think Craig mentioned that. That's right. Wow, very cool. So then how did you get over the fear of just listening to your own voice or producing stuff that you thought wasn't going to be good enough? You know, everyone's fear, right? That imposter syndrome, like, who am I to be putting this out there? How did you get over that?
Yeah. So same mentor that told me to ignore appreciation also told me that when you're dealing with a client or when you're on stage and you get scared, it's usually because you're thinking about yourself. And when you start thinking about the person you're serving, all that goes away. You might have some butterflies, but for the most part, if you're focused on serving somebody, then it goes away. And that's literally every day. It's like, who am I serving? And, you know, we have an avatar of our ideal client and we know exactly who we're speaking to on the other side of the camera. And when I'm sitting here like this, talking to you, I'm talking to you. And when I'm sitting there talking to the camera about a YouTube video, I'm talking to, you know, Don and Jessica, who happen to be our neighbors. They aren't our clients, but they're like the epitome of ideal clients because he's an engineer, he's in education. And if I can explain something to an engineer and then go, so what that means to somebody who's in education, and basically cover the gamut of the technical perspective and the, you know, easy to understand perspective. Not saying that people who are in education need it in an easy to understand format, but they need it in a different format than an engineer. Well, if I can cover that on a video, then I'll have a high likelihood of getting the information across to the audience in a method where, you know, they stay and watch a large percentage of the video. And when they do that, they typically will come back for more.
Yeah, awesome. Like that positioning of how can you serve people kind of then makes the whole process more important, because then it's not about you. It's like, hey, I think I have information that can help people. I'm just going to do my best to get it out there. That kind of changes the whole context of what you're doing. That's really beautiful. I love that. And how did you overcome the fear of spending money to invest in this business? Because I feel like just hearing you speak right now and seeing what you're doing, you clearly have invested in yourself. How did you get over that fear? Or was that just a natural thing? Or was it maybe never a fear? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You know, well, there's been some times where I've spent a lot of money on different mentors that I was like, wow, I'm going to spend $20,000 on this guy for 12 months, or I'm going to spend $50,000 on this guy for 12 months. And, you know, you sit there and you go, oh boy, like that's a big nut. But the thing that I've realized is that when you do that and you spend that type of money on something, you go into it with a different perspective. You're like, this has to be worth it. And instead of going, well, I don't agree with this guy, this or this or this or this, and going, well, that was stupid, I shouldn't have spent that money, you really start to look at what they say and value what they say and implement things. And my experience has been, it's always paid off. Always.
If anyone's listening to this that wants to start doing some YouTube videos, and I don't want you to give away all, you know, your secrets, but is there like obvious stuff? I mean, you can look at I think you glanced at our channel. You can totally make fun of us or just use a general avatar. Is there things that people just do incorrectly, whether it's just consistency or I don't know what comes to mind that you just see people obviously doing wrong all the time that drives you nuts?
Yeah. From a YouTube perspective, one is giving up too early. I mean, if you look at my videos in 2014 and I like didn't come back to them for 5 years, I gave up way too early. And that's the number one thing I see is like people go and they start and they get excited and then they only have 200 subscribers a year later. And what they don't realize is that they're like right on the cusp of having a big breakthrough moment. So it's like continuing to put the gas pedal down is hugely important. And then ideation. When I look at your YouTube account, part of my mission is going to be to get you guys to start doing this properly for two reasons. One is because there's like just a couple tiny little tweaks to what you guys do and we can make it go crazy. And the other is because the information out there on real estate investing is largely taken up by people who are on that like get rich quick scheme. And all they're trying to do is get that $50,000 from that potential investor. And really they aren't trying to provide great information. They're just trying to provide information that sells. So to have an account like yours and a company like yours putting information out there and not having it get the views it deserves, to me is like the biggest disservice ever.
Oh, shit. Yeah, got it. When you say it like that, I'm like, oh shit. Yeah.
And you guys put out a lot of content, like a ton of content. The only problem with the content that you guys put out is that, you're titling it like it's
like it was 2008
rather than something somebody else wants to see, right? Yeah, like it's 2008, like when nobody knew how to title thumbnails, right? So,
oh boy.
So when we look at your stuff, it's like it's like very small tweaks. I mean, if you go and you look at Steve Saretsky's videos and you look at my videos, you look at anybody in the real estate space in Canada, you'll notice that all of our titles are very similar. And there's always this gap between the thumbnail and the title that creates curiosity. And there's a reason why they're all pretty similar, is because the guys who have a ton of views have figured out what the algorithm's looking for, and what the algorithm is looking for is what the audience is looking for. So when you title a video, it's as simple as going, okay, well, does the audience want to see something that is, I don't know,
boring?
What is the cap rate of properties in Toronto? Well, probably not. But what they do want to see is how to make money in real estate investing in Toronto. Like, where are the opportunities? And then if you can title them in such a way that people are actually going to watch them, it's not rocket science. Most of what the YouTube algorithm and what the YouTube audience wants is already out there. It's finding what people are clicking on and then emulating that and then putting your own spin on it. When you put your own spin on it, that's where you get an engaged audience and a returning audience. So figure out what's already working on the titles and the thumbnails perspective. That's packaging, and then put your own spin on it from an education perspective. And it's pretty easy.
What about people who are getting started who think, it's too late for me? Like I've missed the YouTube thing. Nolan's, I'm in mortgages. Nolan's already out there. Like I'll never compete with Nolan. Or I see other real estate people or any fitness, pick the industry, right? What do you say to those people?
There's no competition out there. So unlike Instagram and TikTok, where it's like your value is based on the number of followers you have, with YouTube, it's really about people who return and watch more videos. And I've seen guys that have small channels, 2,000-3,000 subscribers, who make $1 million in real estate every single year. And now they're getting 5,000 subscribers and 10,000, and the numbers just go up. And it's really about having a platform to scale yourself. And does it matter if you have 3,000 subscribers or 40,000 subscribers if every single day, instead of having 24 hours worth of Nolan, you have 65 hours worth of Nolan or 100 hours worth of Nolan? The numbers for me are actually, for every single hour of every day, 65 hours of my content is being watched. So I scaled myself by 65 times and then multiplied again by 3, because instead of working an 8-hour day, I'm working a 24-hour day. So, I think it's about creating an audience that's your audience, and you don't have to worry about competing with other people. It's literally just finding a group of people that resonate with you and bringing them into your space and into your world. And if you do that, like, it's easy. And the market's definitely not saturated. Like, there's, especially from the mortgage perspective, there's like maybe 2 other guys in the country that are building an audience that is any sort of size right now. There's a couple that I'm training that are going to be really big.
Oh, cool.
And then from a real estate perspective, it's like each market's different. So pick your market. If it's Toronto, there's Jordan Skrinko, who's the pre-condo guy, Daniel Foch, who we talked about, who has a pretty good YouTube channel. He's more well-known on Twitter. There's Tom's Story, and then there's maybe 4 or 5 other people. Like, you've got this massive ability to reach people via YouTube. And there's literally like 5 or 10 players in there. If you had been told when you went to get your real estate license that there was only room for 10 people in the entire real estate industry, what would you have done, right? So it's the same for YouTube. YouTube's just the place where people are watching now instead of bus benches and garbage cans. I can't believe in Toronto that it's a thing for a real estate agent to put their face in a garbage can. Makes me crazy. I'm like, I thought bus benches are bad. You're going to associate yourself with trash. This is why realtors have such a bad name, because you put your face on the thing that they're putting their garbage in, right?
Jeez.
So put that in.
The opportunity is endless. Yeah, we grew up in the world of email marketing. So like all our focus over the years and our biggest database has been email, and that's been our main mechanism, and it's really, really worked well and continues to work well for us. And all these other things have been stuff we've just tacked on, as you quickly see when you see some of our content. So you're just kind of making me think about a whole other things that we have to pay attention to.
Well, it's so easy for you because you just take the stuff that you're emailing and then make a video on it. Right? And it doesn't have to be super high production. Jordan Skrinko, do you know him? Pre-condo?
No.
YouTube channel. So last October, over the course of about 5 videos, he got almost 1 million views.
Oh, wow.
And literally, it was the day he released the first video. He's like, screw it. I'm not turning on the fancy camera. I'm not turning on the fancy mics. I'm just going to do like a screen share with a PowerPoint, and I'm going to use my iPhone to film it. It was the biggest video he ever made. So you don't have to worry about production. Just make the content.
Yeah, and something you said about the consistency of it, I think that people giving up too early. That's something I just see a lot in just all forms of marketing. And so I'm glad you're just kind of saying it. And then the relationship you have with your audience is deep. Like, that's very clear to me. And I think that's just something I just strongly believe in, is that your clients and the people that you are serving, like you're saying, if you can have a relationship with them, that is your biggest business asset. Like, that is the asset of the business, because now Nolan, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but Nolan can go off and do anything he wants. You can open a restaurant, you can open a car wash, you can do anything else, but the trust that you have with that audience of people who really like Nolan, they are now you could go selling t-shirts, you could go raise cattle, you can do whatever you want. And that segment of customers that has that bond with you is going to follow Nolan for the rest of his life. And that is the real business value. And so it's really interesting to me to see you build that with your YouTube channel the way you have, because that asset is worth much more than just mortgages, as you're well aware. Like, that's something you're doing now, but who knows what you turn this into. And you're already coaching other people and stuff, so you're already leveraging it in different ways. So it's just incredible to watch. It's really, really impressive. Nolan, anything else you want to share with that? I guess we can kind of leave it there. Maybe you can describe like 2 ways for people to get a hold of you on the mortgage side, and what provinces you work in Canada, and who's your ideal we know you don't work with investor clients, Nolan. We know you don't work with investor client, but who's your...
Unless they're an existing client.
Yeah, unless they're an existing client. Yeah, sure. Yes, I got that. But yeah, who's your client on the mortgage? And then maybe who are you coaching, and how would people find you on that side of what you're doing as well? Could you share both?
Yeah, for sure. So from a mortgage perspective, if you're buying a home to live in, go to mortgage360.ca. Our claim to fame is that we're the first B Corp certified mortgage company in North America. Which means we have the same certification as companies like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's, basically using business as a force for good. It's been a long time since I had to worry about the number of mortgages that came in and the amount of business that we do. Now we do it because we purely want to help people. Normally I have this Thrive and Give sign up there. That's my why, which is to inspire people to thrive and give back. When we do a mortgage for somebody, there's complete transparency. We actually have the certification to prove it. And it's all about making sure that you get the right information and that you don't do something silly like go and get a 5-year fix from a big bank that, when interest rates do go down, if they do go down, is going to have a massive penalty. So mortgage360.ca on that. And then the YouTube consulting stuff, that's all being done through my Instagram account, which is just real Nolan Matthias. And there we just, I'm really protective about making sure I have the right people in the room for that. But if you're in the real estate industry, you're in the mortgage industry, you're an entrepreneur of any type, don't sleep on YouTube. It's literally the best platform to target your clients. YouTube's been using AI since 2013. Everyone just found out about AI in the last 18 months, and companies like Google, SpaceX, Tesla have been using it forever, and the YouTube algorithm's been on AI forever. And it's the single best targeting tool to actually find your ideal client. So if you're an entrepreneur or if you're in the real estate game, it's definitely a place that you want to go in order to make sure that you can find those clients that are new to you.
And you said go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and by the way, instead of paying for ads in order to track those people, YouTube will pay you to make the content so they can put ads on it. And, for us, it's completely free to make the videos, and we get paid to do it on top of all the mortgage business that we bring in.
Yeah, super cool. And you said in the room, so you're doing live in-person mastermind meetings for this? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so they're live every week on Zoom.
Okay, got it. Every week. Wow. Okay. And then do people commit to, they can find all the details, I'm sure. I'm just curious about it, but yeah, super cool, Nolan. Anything else you want to share? It's a pleasure getting to know you and cross paths. Thanks for being patient with me. I had to reschedule with Nolan because I'm a disaster with my calendar, and Nolan was super patient. So thanks for putting up with me, Nolan. Anything else you want to share that we haven't covered maybe?
No, I just appreciate what you guys are doing, that you're taking a level-headed approach to real estate investing in Canada. I want to see you guys do more of it across Canada, not just in Ontario, and get you guys, everywhere instead of just in the small market that you're in. I know you guys make a big impact there, but let's make this thing national so that you guys can really make an impact and teach people how to do this properly. I can't emphasize enough. We were talking about this before we came on. I can't emphasize enough, good training in real estate investing.
Yeah,
it's hard to come by. There's a lot of training, but there's a lot of people that are teaching people to do things that are not even legal. And to have you guys out here being the voice for this and being, clear about it and being reasonable about it and being smart about it, I think is so important. So let's get you guys out there and get more people to see what you do. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Nolan. I appreciate it. Sometimes, I don't want anyone to think we have it all figured out by any means, but we're trying. So thank you. Thank you for that. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Nolan. I'm sure we're going to cross paths more and more now that we know each other. So really, thank you for doing this.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.